It is just barely before midnight for Sunday, September 21st. My brain hurts still. Yeah, I watched Memories of Murder today, and I've been reading some articles about film. So it's just a lot of academia today. But I have a lot to say about movies. I wouldn't necessarily say that I am a film buff. I enjoy films, and I guess I really enjoy early 2000 Asian films, and Soviet era films are really interesting to watch. And I guess war films are really good, but not the ones that are glorifying war, but the ones that are talking about anti-war, like Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, Nixon Only in Weston, All Quiet on the Front, Western Front, whatever, I'm forgetting the name. I wrote my senior essay on that, and I can't remember, All Quiet on the Western Front. Amazing book, amazing film, two very different storytellings on how they want to portray anti-war. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I just watched 3 Korean films, read a lot of articles, and they were all amazing, but oh my gosh, they were so many things that I can talk about. For one, the 2 films, Memories of Murder and they both have really weird connections to sending things off to the U.S., both with that the quote-unquote virus and them doing it over there, and the U.S. kind of controlling everything, and already talking about dumping the formaldehyde into the sink, which actually in the movie caused the monster to become a thing, or at least is implied to have caused. And then in Memories of Murder, they do they have to send the DNA sampling out there because they're not advanced enough. And that's really interesting. Why are 2 films specifically talking about the U.S. and sending things away and using that as a plot point for hindrance? The U.S. is meddling in with the affairs of the virus and all this, and the mass hysteria being caused by, is there a virus? But there really isn't a virus in The Host. And then in Memories of Murder, it's used as a plot point to feel like somebody else was the murderer. It's really interesting in understanding Korean history and understanding how the U.S. practically not oppressed as much so as the Japanese oppressed them, but occupied them in the same way that you think of many other third world countries the U.S. has done. It's very interesting that in both contexts, those are in negative connotations in the film, but they're also, look at America, they're so much more advanced than us, which is really interesting to just have both those things in 2 different style of movies. One of them was set in the 80s in a true story, and the other one's in 2006 and is a sci-fi horror thriller one. Really, really interesting that's just kind of how it happened. And then Old Boy, oh my gosh, Old Boy was so crazy. That was one of the most crazy films I've ever watched. There was one shot in the film, I think it was an hour, 20 minutes. It was actually, I know that it's hour 20, 24 because I put it in my notes when watching it. That's also why my brain hurts a lot, and I'm kind of talking really fast right now because I took notes when watching these movies because, as I said, I'm watching them to analyze them. So, yeah. It's not like I'm just watching them because I want to watch them, even though I do want to watch them because I think they're all really, really good movies. But it's you put on a movie to watch it, there's a difference between putting on a movie and analyzing it. But there's one scene, which is an hour, 20 minutes, 24 seconds in the film, where it is a really, really cool shot where the camera is tilted. And it's in this scene where the main character, Dose, I don't actually know how to say it in Korean, so I'm not going to even try. The main character is retracing his memory that he's forgotten in this school and is essentially following himself, and it's really trippy. But they rotated the camera on him going up in the stairs, and when you look at it, it looks like that famous painter where he has the stairs going in all different directions, and it's kind of an illusion, there would be a stair going in the normal way, but then there's a stair on the wall going down and somebody's walking on it. and I don't know the artist's name, but it's a really, really cool shot, and it's so just beautifully made out because it's like talking about how he's lost and things don't make sense, and it's kind of confusing, and that's really echoed in just that one frame, and it's really cool. I'm nerding out about that one, but that was a really cool frame. But one of the things that I noticed in Oldboy was the use of hypnotism and the major plot points and things that happen because of it. Oh my God. But what I noticed is that that's really similar to Cure. And Cure is a fantastic film. Horror, it's very different from it. It's also a Japanese film, but it was made in 1997 versus 2001, I think. 2003 maybe? I think 2003. But it's really interesting that they both use hypnotism as a way of showing evil. Where in Cure, it's about bringing out the latent evil within a good person. And in Oldboy, it's about a good person being hypnotized to do something bad. It's kind of the same thing. It's a little different. And I'm not saying that these films are connected in any way or the directors are connected in any way, but I just find it really fascinating that two films from very different cultures, two different times, not necessarily two different genres, but I mean a little bit different. One's more action-y and the other one's more neo-noir. Maybe not even neo, just noir. But have hypnotism as a main plot point, kind of being like a culmination of evil within the film. And I just find that so interesting. And I mean, you could also bring parallels from The Host to any Godzilla movie. It's very similar. Like if you think about it, the U.S. did something bad, like dumping the formaldehyde down the sink, which went into the river, and then the atomic bomb in Japan, which is essentially, that's what Godzilla is. It's a direct response to the generational trauma because of that. And while I don't think that the Host has that level of complexity when it comes to the U.S. occupation in the late 40s, early 50s, right before the Korean War, but it has the similarities of it creating a monster and that monster coming alive, and then it's kind of being almost about unity at the end. I mean, the family comes together. They are becoming a little more national because people are trying to release this one guy who thinks they have a virus but doesn't because it got leaked that the U.S. was lying. And then the other one is about kind of the Japanese people fighting against together and overcoming all that trauma. And I find that those two are very similar in ideologies as well, the same way as Cure and Oldboy. And there are so many things that I've realized after watching all these films that are just very similar culturally between these two. Like Perfect Blue, it is, I think, as of now, my favorite movie of all time, at least in like my top 5. It is an absolute masterful movie, mostly because of the story, but what the critiques are of that movie, what critiques that movie brings up is the critiques on idol culture. I mean, you got the obsessive fan, which also kind of goes along with the manager being parasocial and delusional. You have the corporate sexualization of those people. If you look at her trying to get into the acting spotlight, so she does risque photos. She also does a scene, can't say the word because it's a bad word, but it is a scene in a movie that they're trying to shoot, and it's very visceral to watch and quite disturbing because then the shots just pause and they're in the motion, but they're kind of like, I'm so sorry, I have to be doing this. It is a disturbing and very, very powerful shot. But then also you just have the social pressure of performance by these idols and the mental toll it takes on them. And that's not uncommon in the Korean idol world. I mean, upon research, I just wanted to look up some Korean idols who have died, and there was like a list of 15, and I specifically found one that was a artist actor who, from harassment online and social pressure, sadly decided to take her own life. I think the article said self-murder, but I don't know if that was just a censorship of the word. But that plays, I think, a really, really big comparison. Well, there is, I unfortunately I can't draw a film comparison between the two cultures, because Perfect Blue, I think, it's hard to say this one is like this one, because Perfect Blue, I think, lives in its own universe as a story. Not as a story, but as a production. While the story may be something that can be told, the way it was done in Perfect Blue was masterful. But it's so similar. There's these connections between these two that I just watched the Japanese films because I wanted to watch them, because I have an interest in Japanese. I'm taking it as a class. I'll be going abroad there. I am interested in it. And those films were very, very similar in context to the ones from Korea that I recently just watched. But I also went down a very, very big rabbit hole about the violence that this media is said to have caused, especially Old Boy. Old Boy is a very, very violent film. What's really interesting, though, is that I don't see it as violent as much. That may just be because I'm a little bit tainted from the movies that I have watched, or the fact that I am American and violence is inherently within our culture. But that was just a normal movie. There were some very visceral scenes, but it was less of violence and more of that last scene in There Will Be Blood, where it's just kind of like an ooh, ooh kind of moment, where he's just kind of repeatedly hitting him with a baton. But yeah. But there was a really interesting article that talked about how there's a relation to Old Boy and the Virginia Tech shooter in 2007, which was a Korean national who perpetrated a shooting in Virginia Tech that cost 30 lives, which is a really, really, really big deal for early on. I mean, Sandy Hook was not until 2013, 2010s maybe, so that was a very, very big deal. And the way that it was portrayed as motivations was a revenge, like saying, you made me do this. There was a picture of him doing the pose with the hammer like it is in Old Boy. And there's that really interesting discussion of violence in that. And that kind of got me a little bit further, is that why is it? Because Old Boy is also, there's a Spike Lee remake. And when I can't watch it because I have to pay for it. I already paid for 2 movies already, and I don't want to pay for a really bad movie that just feels kind of crappy. But it's not good. I've looked at reviews and stuff. It's not good. And that got me thinking that this one is such a cultural impact in Korea and a cultural impact around the world that it may have perpetrated a very, very deadly shooting in 2007. And so when they remade the film, why is it bad? Is it bad because it's just a unfaithful adaptation? It's just bad it's hard to say it's bad acting because it has so many famous actors. The story is there. It's very difficult to not be able to do that. It's such a visceral and twisted story that it writes itself. But why is it bad? Is it because as Americans, we glorify violence in the way of film? Like, we see violence as a means of heroism and the good guys do all this stuff. I mean, one of the big examples that I can give is that when I watch Sicario, it is a film about good people doing bad things to get good things done. It's like the greater good. But I had a really hard time watching it because I was agreeing with the quote-unquote good guys doing bad things. I have been conditioned within film to not have these violent outbursts and these going against the laws be deemed a bad thing, because there have been so many movies that are like, look at this bad guy, good guy, he's gonna go do some things, he's going to kill a lot of bad guys, and then he's gonna be the hero in the end, and there's no fallout after it. And seeing all that happen, seeing everything go on in Sicario, it was hard to get behind the message and all the emotions that the director wanted to have, because I agreed with the good bad guys in a way. So is that because I just have a different moral set than what the producer wanted to have? Or is it because, as an American who's been conditioned to this type of violence within media, within its own country, within its own government, that it has been kind of, I wouldn't say like nullified, like I'm not affected by it anymore? I mean, and there's also that, and I'm like, that's a very interesting thing to ask. Like, is this because of this? And there's also that whole idea is that, is it just because Americans are using it as just a way to get money? Because if you look at them and just misinterpreting what everything is about, because these films and these stories are so inherently Korean, that to an outside perspective, it is it's a lot different viewing, and that's interesting to talk about. But I mean, another thing I can bring up is Squid Game. Like, Squid Game and Parasite are two fantastic pieces of media that talk about the economical and social social status struggles within Korea. Like, people are struggling, and they have to the only way in Parasite, it's the only way to get rich is to become a con artist. That's the only way you can go up in the world. Or it would be Squid Game, where it's the only way to get out of debt is to do these deadly challenges for entertainment. Those are two very similar stories, but then you have Mr. Beast come in and essentially rip that whole nuance away from these stories. And sorry, there's just lights went out in a room that I didn't think lights would go out. But rip away all the nuances and add this huge layer of hypocrisy that I'm so surprised that he does not see, granted because he's only there for the money. And does Squid Game itself, and again, strip away all the nuance to the story and the critique of capitalism and all this, and just the hypocritical nature of the show itself. There's so many things within Korean media that is so cool, and I can't really talk about it that much because I'm not a film student. I know a good amount about film, and I can understand impacts of stories and the nuances of these critiques that these things are telling, just because when you're interested about a subject or interested about these type of movies, you can do that. And also, I think I have been taught to be very analytical about things. I think that came up with when I was at boarding school. My English teacher for 2 years was one of the smartest English teachers I ever met, had a doctorate from like UC Berkeley. It was insane, but she taught me how to be analytical and to look through something and bring up a really interesting point. Like, I'm going to bring up the All Quiet on the Western Front, Exploiting and Investing, is I watched the movie and I read the book, and both were anti-war. But the movie was anti-war in this way that you watch it and you get a visceral reaction of the combat around you, and you see the struggle, you see the pain, and you see the direct effects of it and what's happening, and that's what's making it anti-war. But the book, there's one action scene technically. There's one scene, and it's them running away from mortar shells. The entire book is a story of the effects of a war on somebody and how scary those are and how scary they are to everybody else around you. Like in the movie, the character gets a really good, well, not a good death. He dies early, but he gets to hear the bells of the armistice. In the book, he gets one paragraph. You're told, and he's done with the military academy, officer academy, and he goes off to war again. And then you get a little bit of section from the parents' perspective and sister, I think, and then you get a paragraph that just says, 2 months later, he died in war. And it's such a different thing, and I've learned to be analytical about it, and so I can with these films. But I really want to just ask somebody who has... there's a professor here at this school who is a professor in film, and specifically Korean and Japanese film. So I just sent him an email, actually. It's really late, but I needed to get it out so we possibly could see it tomorrow. I sent him an email saying if he'd be interested in doing this interview, because I still haven't found anybody. But there are so many questions I want to ask and so many things that I don't think I can answer, but I think would be really, really cool and very important to have answered from somebody who's a lot more knowledgeable about these situations. So, sorry, I just had to get some of those thoughts out, because these movies and these Japanese movies, these Korean movies, are so cool. I am utterly fascinated with movies brought up by times of struggle. I mean, Soviet-era productions are so interesting because as you go on, you get to see the propaganda machine, and it slowly turned down into a form of protest until you get to the movies within the 70s and then maybe the 80s, where it fully turns into just an entire movie protesting about the culture around the Soviet Union. I mean, Stalker. Stalker is an insane movie, really boring at times, but it has so many little protests in it and talking about greed, and it's really interesting to look at. And I mean, there's also German films that I've watched. I mean, All Quiet on the Western Front, as I mentioned before, but there's one called In the Lives of Other, in die Leben die Anderen, I think is the German title, which is East Berlin, this writer trying to get something out. And it's a very, very powerful film about censorship of media and authoritarianism. And it's another, again, a very beautiful movie of the struggle. I also like Grave of the Fireflies, if you were to think about it, Godzilla. But even some of like Satoshi Kon's work is amazing. You get Perfect Blue is an amazing example, but you also have Paranoid Agent. Paprika also has that moment where they're in that dreamlike state, and it's one scene, but it has just every single problem that he believed of Japanese society is crammed into that one moment, and it's just this kind of mind-opening thing. So, and I mean, so many other films that I can talk about, like Akira, Memories, Robot Carnival, Jinro, so many things around these 80s to late 2000s that are so story-rich and powerful, and message-wise, they're just so good to watch and to analyze and to think about. And the producers want you to watch them and think about. Studio Ghibli wants you to watch Grave of the Fireflies and wants you to be devastated to understand the impact of that war had onto the innocent civilians around. The people want to, the directors of Full Metal Jacket want you to watch Full Metal Jacket and see the corporate greed and the ending. Oh my God, the ending with the Mickey Mouse theme, talking about how you can take so many things from that these are just children thrust into a world that they do not know, and they're coping with singing the song, but also talking about how Disney, this giant entity, is now their own life, where it's talking about corporate greed and capitalism, and how essentially the Vietnam War was a war just against communism, and that's the only reason you're fighting against communism is because capitalism is what you believe in. There's so many cool things that happen within these types of movies that I just love, and I don't get to talk about it a lot because I'm the only one in my family who likes these movies, and and my friend who does like these movies is an aerospace engineer, or training to be one, so he doesn't have a lot of time to watch movies, and when he does have free time, that means he's out partying. So I can't say, please watch this movie, but it is, I love those things, and I've talked for 25 minutes about this. I could talk for so much more just about how I love film. Maybe I should really actually take some classes on film. That would be interesting. But But yeah, there's so many cool things about just these three movies and how it relates to a lot of the things that I have watched, and a lot of the story elements relate to a lot of things and how it can kind of snowball down into something really, really cool. Talking maybe about the U.S. capitalism and the isolation of Korean suffering and how it can only be interpreted by Koreans, and when transferred out into the Western world, we see it as an isolated story or just a unique, cool thing where it could have significant influence within Korean culture. Like, I mean, Memories of a Murder is about a serial killer, and I see that movie, and I can be like, oh, this is about a serial killer when I know the story. But all I can think about is, oh my gosh, this movie is really similar in tone to Prisoners. I don't see this as this big cultural impact as much as maybe somebody who lived through that time or had the after effects of that crime echoing through society. There's a movie, it's The Chase, that I can't watch right now because I cannot find a place to buy it. But would also talk about that. And I'm very, like, sure, we have movies like Seven and Zodiac, but the Zodiac Killer has been fictionalized so much that it's not this problem of our society. I mean, almost every single serial killer has been fictionalized and fantasized about in a way that is disassociated us from the actual tragedies that they've done. Whereas Memories of a Murder is such a unique spot because it was in a time where the murder was not solved yet, and they talked about the all the trauma that goes on with that, and I wonder how it's seen differently. Is it seen now as this is just a fantastic film talking about it, and it's kind of I wouldn't say romanticized, but like artified, or does it still have that trauma of like, oh my gosh, in our country there was this serial killer and he did a lot of bad things? I mean, The Chase also has that same thing as well. I wonder, like, there's so many questions I have to ask and so many things that I will not know just because of how much I've learned. I got to stop talking about this because I should go to bed. The feeling I'm going to get sick for the next couple of days. So, yeah, film is fantastic. I love watching film. I love media in general. I mean, video games are beautiful, films are beautiful, music is beautiful, just because there's so many things that can come out of it and so many ways to tell stories that it's so cool to watch. And yeah, if you have a chance, gotta go watch early 2000 Asian media, Soviet era media, Vietnam era media, whether it be film, music, or TV shows. Very, very important things have been said, and a lot of people just don't watch it because they're foreign films. But you need to. It's an experience.